helping empower local people in Charlotte, which is a community-based organization that has helped to shape the civic engagement process in Charlotte. And you'll notice that their report, available outside, the first in our series of city-based reports, has a rather unconventional subtitle, which reflects the contradictory, to put it nicely, role of local government there, a welcome denied. And she'll be followed by Teresa Castellanos, who comes to us from San Jose, where she's a senior figure in the Santa Clara County government, where she's helped build on that region's innovative track record in supporting immigrant civic engagement and incorporation. Then we're going to hear from Ricardo Gambetta, who manages the Inclusive Communities Program with the National League of Cities, following his experience helping the city of Indianapolis help to relate to immigrants more constructively. And I gather he follows that closely about every weekend. And finally, we'll hear from Luvia Quiñones, who works with the New Americans Initiative, which is in Illinois, which is the leading immigrant integration initiative among state governments in the U.S. I will say not a lot of competition there, but anyway, we'll hear more about that. And so our panelists bring together perspectives from, respectively, grassroots, city level, county level, and state levels. Not a coincidence. And we've asked our panelists to speak for just 7 or 8 minutes to kick off the conversation, to provide some background on the experience of local or state governments dealing with immigrant civic engagement. And so before we have time to open up the dialogue with all of you. So to start off, Alice, if you could please introduce us to the main trends, for starters, in Charlotte.
Okay. Again, my name is Alice Bennett from Helping Empower Local People in Charlotte, and thank you all for having us here this afternoon. Local trends that we see in Charlotte, I think we've been doing this work now for, I think, about 3 years, primarily led by Christopher Bishop, but now we actually have an organizer on staff who's actually here with us this afternoon, so glad to have him here as well. And the trends that we have actually seen or have been involved with or have noticed are, while there are several organizations in Charlotte who do some work with the immigrant community, as most of you, or as some of the comments have stated earlier, there is really no real infrastructure on how to deal with policy changes and policy issues. The majority of the organizations that we have worked with have spent a lot of time addressing the immediate needs of the immigrants as they're coming in and asking for whatever those specific things are. But as we're trying to learn how to get them more involved in the political process, we're finding that they don't necessarily understand what that means and what that looks like. And because the issues are so demanding, they may or may not just have that as a focus for them. As it relates to the public officials themselves, I think Chris likes to call it they have a thin skin, but I'm not sure if it's they have a thin skin as much as they're just not aware or their concern level is just really low. They will come out and hear a wonderful report launch from the Welcome Denied, but when it comes to really addressing policy issues and how we need to be more intentional about making sure this community is welcomed, they tend to look more towards the business community, and they allow them to shape their vision for the city other than them having a vision themselves. So they will definitely make sure that they vote up on sports arenas and NASCAR Hall of Fames and that type of thing. But when it really comes to talking about the issues that impact the immigrant community, they have no vision. So the majority of the work that we have done is really training and teaching the organizations that we do deal with. I think Reyes, in partnership with HELP, had a wonderful meeting back in March where we had maybe 300-400 people in attendance. And they actually came up with some very good issues they wanted to deal with, one of them being 287G enforcement, one of them being driver's license for immigrants, excuse me, public education and healthcare concerns. And that work is still developing, but I think we still need to identify and look at how do we better train them and get them educated on the whole political system so that we now understand that the issues that you want to address on a local level from those organizations are all directly tied to the policy. They go hand in hand. It's not one or the other. It's just trying to teach and train how to move forward on all of that. So that's where we are as a trend in Charlotte as of right now. And I think that was probably less than 7 minutes.
Whoa. Okay, we're going to now turn to Teresa Castellanos.
So what I'm going to do is talk briefly about the work that we've done in Santa Clara County. And I'm going to start off a little bit with demographics. So California is 3 times more Asian than the rest of the nation and almost 3 times more Latino. 3 times more Latino than the rest of the country. Also, the black population is much smaller in California than it is in the rest of the nation. When you look at the foreign-born population, it's close to 30% of the population. Compared to the rest of the United States, it's about 11%. So in Santa Clara County, when we look at demographics in 2000, it was about 44% white, 25% Asian, 24% Latino, and 2.8% black. So in Santa Clara County, we're talking about Silicon Valley here, the 5 largest immigrant populations are Mexico, Vietnam, China, India, and the Philippines. Santa Clara County has more immigrants than any other county in Northern California. We compete a lot with San Francisco. San Francisco has more of a name, but Santa Clara County's population is much bigger. And we also the county with the largest Asian and Latino populations in Northern California. And based on the demographics, ballots are translated currently in Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Tagalog. So just to look a little bit at the demographic shift, in 1970, 80% of the population of the city of San Jose was white. Today, less than 30% of the population is white. In San Jose, there are more Vietnamese, there are more people of Vietnamese origin than any other city outside of Vietnam. And the same is true for Asian Indians. That's the largest city outside of India. San Jose is one of the most integrated cities in the country. When we look at 2006, we also see a larger demographic shift. And at that point, Santa Clara County has the largest immigrant population in all of California, larger than LA's. If you're talking about numbers, LA County is a bigger number, but in terms of percentages, in 2006, Santa Clara County has the largest percentage. In 2009, we're equal. So there are over 600,000 immigrants in Santa Clara County. And when you look at the ethnic diversity, there are over 40 Asian language media outlets in Santa Clara County. There's an estimate of 260,000 undocumented immigrants, 200,000 which are Latino, about 50,000 which are Asian. And when we look at who makes up the science and engineering talents, 55% are foreign-born, and 40% of the total regional workforce is foreign-born. So when we look at Santa Clara County, we have the 2nd largest Hindi speakers in the country, the 2nd largest population of Vietnamese speakers in the country, the 3rd largest population of Farsi speakers in the country, and the 5th largest population of Chinese speakers in the country. And despite this, the most common language other than English spoken in Santa Clara County is Spanish. So 49% of the population speaks another language other than English in Santa Clara County. So when you're looking at the demographic shift, I think it's important to look also at the issue of immigrants and immigrant communities living together and working together. And this is my little trick picture here. Are we looking at a Latino family or are we looking at an Asian family? Asian? Who votes Asian? Who votes Latino? Actually, they're Indian. And so I think there's a lot of similarities that happen across communities, and when you're facing discrimination and you're facing lack of access issues, there's a lot more similarity than there is division. And so when we're looking at the Latino population and the emerging Latino political force, I think one of the key things we need to look at from the beginning is coalition building, because there is more that brings us together than actually divides us. And if you look at the African American community that's been organizing for over 100 years, they still can't do it by themselves. There has to be coalition building always, and so I think that's key to the work that's being done right now. So in Santa Clara County, what we have done is that since 1996, we created the Santa Clara County Citizenship Initiative. We fund programs for immigration legal services. We had a 18-month research project, which was called the Summit on Immigrant Needs and Contributions, And we have several publications that we've published, and all this can be found on immigrantinfo.org. We also have developed an Immigrant Leadership Institute that we developed as a county level. When we could no longer fund this, because obviously we've been going through 8 years of budget cuts, we passed it on to the local community college. And so this continues to occur. It is happening. We've had over 400 students that have graduated from this, and the beauty of this has been bringing the immigrant community together, not just Latinos together, but the immigrant community as a whole together. And what has been beautiful about this is that when you have the immigrant community look at themselves as an immigrant community, not just as Latinos, not just as Vietnamese, not just as Africans from Africa, but when you look at the bigger community, in Santa Clara County, you're talking about 1/3 of the population. And if you count their children, you're talking about 2/3 of the population that have the immigrant experience, that have similar immigrant attitudes, and that face similar immigrant barriers. We also have a hotline in 3 different languages. When we had more funding, it was in 5 languages. We've done funding around community education for immigrant communities. You know, how do you deal with U.S. society? How do you deal around education issues as a parent? There's different roles and expectations. How do you deal with the police in the United States? There's different roles and expectations. Another thing that is important about Santa Clara County is that our local politicians have decided to invest in all of the community. So for over 20 years, we've had prenatal care for all, because obviously the children that are going to be born are U.S. citizens. We've also invested in the Second Harvest Food Bank in our local community so that there is food diversity, because even in poverty and even safety net, people need to feel comfortable with the food that they're eating. And of course, Santa Clara County was where the Children's Health Care Initiative began. And so what happened there in California was that Santa Clara County invested the tobacco money in health care for all children, regardless of immigration status. And so that was the first place that it happened in the United States. Another thing that we have done is that we've created a speakers bureau. And so we have 15 people. We have 30 people from 15 different countries of origin who go and speak about their immigration process and their immigration issues. And the idea is that the community speaks for themselves. We don't speak for them. But they talk about their immigration process in the context of whatever issue it is that they're talking about. They could be talking about DV. They could be talking about the arts. They could be talking about mediation in their community. And so the idea is to get people to become culturally proficient. And one of the things that we've discovered in this discussion about immigration is you can't talk about cultural competency, because then there's people who are competent and people who are incompetent, but talk about proficiency as something that is continually progressive and that someone can always improve on. We have bi-monthly forums. We have bold dialogues as county government. And what we've done there is that when there is a difficult issue, we bring communities together to talk to each other about what are the issues that are happening. For example, we did bring the Latino and the Asian community together to talk about what were the tensions that were happening between the communities. In terms of our accomplishments, with our citizenship initiative, we've assisted over 120,000 people in their citizenship process. We hold citizenship days in 19 different languages. Immigrant Info has received over 1 million hits. When we had more funding, we had literacy classes for citizenship that were in Spanish and in Cambodian as part of the process for people to be able to learn how to read and write in English. And when we had more money, we used over $100,000 to help people pay for their citizenship application. So in terms of the politicals we have people who've obviously decided that as politicals, they're going to represent the whole county. They're not just going to represent the people who have voted for them. And as part of that, they have taken positions on the driver's license issues. They opposed H.R. 4437. They've opposed the Minutemen. And they support state funding for state naturalization program. So I think some of the important policy issues that we need to look at is that even though we're talking about immigrants as a block, and I think we're talking about Latinos forming an important part of that block, is I think that with every community you have to look at their nation of origin, you have to look at their ethnicity. You can't deny what that is, because then you deny an important part of what is part of the immigrant community. And so what we have learned is that when people begin to talk about what's intimate, about what there is, their culture and their values, you get to what's universal. And it's a strange thing for me to realize that in this process, that when you talk about things that are important to you, you talk about the human experience. And so obviously it's important, especially in Santa Clara County, where it's the immigrant community is 60% of the population, if you count their children, that they be at the table for any discussion about what is happening locally, whether it's health care, whether it's education, whether it's the economy. So some of the challenges I think that we're facing is that everyone is facing government restructuring. So we are all looking at budget cuts. We are all looking at budget issues. Even though we're a nationwide model, we are at constant risk. We are constantly having to justify our right to exist. I think there is currently a debate between the definition of access and luxury issues. For a lot of people, based on language, it's an access issue. If you don't have the information in a language that you understand, it's difficult to access services. But for people who are the decision makers, they're seeing language as a luxury item. You know, you pay for the diversity of language when you have money. That's a luxury. And in these budget cut times, we need to get rid of programs that address language issues. And so, but that becomes an access issue. I think the other thing that we're seeing is that there is a difference between institutional change and a leadership with understanding. So for a lot of things that we've been able to create, it's been because we had leadership that was willing to make a commitment, not because the institution understands the demographic shift. So that's one of the things that we've been facing. And I think there's also a generational understanding. I think for younger people who've grown up with the demographic shift, there is the clarity that this has happened, you need to address it. I think for people who have not grown up with the demographic shift, there's less of an understanding and they see things as luxury items. In terms of lessons learned that we have had, government has an important role as a convener. It's important to be inclusive from the beginning. And it's always important to acknowledge the expertise, the knowledge, and the contributions of immigrant communities. What happens many times is that we have the sense that the immigrant community has difficulties understanding and difficulties becoming integrated, and the reality is that maybe they didn't grow up here, but they bring a lot of knowledge, they bring a lot of expertise, and we need to be able to tap into that. It's important to promote the development of leadership, and it's important to dialogue with the community about change and conflict, not to be afraid of it, because if we don't deal with it, then we never get to the issues. And then finally, change is constant. So pending research questions that I see is we need to continue to document the history. I think a lot is happening, but people know locally what's happening, and nationally we still don't have a real grasp about the nationwide trends. I think we need to redefine civic engagement and participation, because if you look at it as only voting, then you're excluding a lot of people. But if you look at it as people being involved in their community, being involved in their church, being involved in their union, then you can redefine what democracy means. Because I think the everyday acts of participating in your community are as equally as important as the people who go and vote. So I think we have a redefinition that we need to do there. Obviously, highlighting best practices is important, and including the community in the solutions is important. And so I finished with our big March picture. This is over, oh, it's gone. This was our march that we had in San Jose, California. It ended up being the largest march in the United States based on proportion to the population. And so the amazing thing about this was that it probably was organized in 2 weeks because we spent so much time fighting with each other. But when it got to the moment of having to do what we had to do, the community was there. And there was a knowledge, and there was things that could not have been planned for that the community knew. So there is a knowledge that the community has about political participation, about what they want, about their history, and we need to learn how to tap better into that in our community. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Teresa. Ricardo.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here today. Before I show a very short video, let me tell you a little bit about NLC. NLC is the National League of Cities. It's the largest municipal organization in the country. We represent over 19,000 cities. As everybody knows, immigration is a federal issue, but with profound social, economic, and political implications at the local level. Our immigration system is broken, but mayors and local officials are the ones who have to deal with this issue every single day. So NLC is launching a very important initiative nationwide to try to promote civic engagement, civic participation, naturalization, and citizenship at the local level. We want to educate mayors about these important issues, and also we want to engage local immigrant communities in the process. So I will be happy to answer more questions, but before that, I would like to show a very short video about this program.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Okay, well. So this is a new program nationwide. We're doing different things. We're working, putting together different white papers, policy papers on different issues. We want to provide with specific tools to different mayors and local officials across the country. And also we want to focus in small and medium-sized cities. You know, most of the big cities, like Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, they are doing okay, they're doing fine. We're worrying more about small towns, small cities, who don't have the resources, who don't have the expertise on this particular field. So we're going to continue working nationwide. We are putting together a national database of people who have interest on this topic. So if you have my contact information, I will be happy to add your contact information to our list. We want to establish a national network of people, not just from government, but also from social service organizations, community groups who want to be part of this. We have different publications. We have a newsletter. We're doing trainings in different areas across the country. So we want to promote best practices. I think that is very important. You know, there are many cities, as you can see today, many cities who are doing great, and other cities who actually need help right away. So that is the plan, and I look forward to continue with the conversation in the next few minutes.
Okay, Luvia.
Okay. Again, my name is Luvia Quiñones. I work at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, or known as ICIR. We have a pretty unique citizenship program. How Jonathan said, we're pretty lucky, or I should say blessed, to have a state-funded program for the past 4 years. It's called the New Americans Initiative. At the Illinois Coalition, what we did back before the program was established was looking at the foreign-born population in the state. It's roughly about 1.8 million. This doesn't include children of immigrants like myself. That's an additional about 1.5 million. And when we look at the foreign-born population, you look at how many are undocumented, how many were legal permanent residents, and how many were naturalized citizens. And how do we get from the first point to the last? At the Coalition, it's all about building immigrant power as well as capacity building. So we realized that with community organizing, you teach from know your rights to participating in the marches to volunteering in our citizenship workshops. Without the legal permanent residents becoming citizens, we're never going to get to the goal of building immigrant power. So that's where our program came in. With NAI, it's a coordinated citizenship campaign. So even though it is state-funded, we administer it as a campaign. What I mean by that is it has 3 components, which is community outreach, application processing, and the legal component. It is different from other programs. Previously to NAI in Illinois, there was another citizenship program that solely focused on the refugee community. Unfortunately, there was no media component to it, as well as no access for the Latino community. In Illinois, our largest legal permanent resident population is Latino, or more specifically, Mexican. So now I'm going to tell you briefly in a few minutes kind of how NAI, or the New Americans Initiative, could be a model for other states, as well as why it has continued to still be funded, hopefully right now, because we're still unsure for the next fiscal year given the budget crisis that we have. First, we've been able to drastically increase naturalization rates in Illinois. Second, we've been able to gain bipartisan support. And third, increasing civic participation in the state, which is ultimately one of the goals of the organization. Before the New Americans Initiative started in the state, comparing to now that it's been in effect for 4 years, the number of naturalization rates have increased about 48%, largely due, of course, through what happened back in the 2006 with the marches, that people realized the importance of citizenship. We have directly assisted a little bit over 279,000 individuals with information, a mix of our toll-free number that's trilingual, Polish, Spanish, and English, as well as through our website and through community outreach. We have a total about 25 organizations doing solely outreach, and in total about 35 organizations in the whole program statewide. With the actual applications, we have assisted over 39,000 individuals becoming citizens. Most of them are Latino, but there's also a large population, the Polish community, as well as South Asian. In regards to NAI getting the bipartisan support, back about 2 years ago, all the Republican legislators in Illinois actually signed a letter helping us keep the funding. There was a point where we were phasing a cut about 2 years ago, and because of the bipartisan support, we've been able to stay within the same funding level of $3 million. Third, in regards to increasing civic participation, our motto has always been participate, become a citizen, vote. So for those that are not eligible to become citizens, volunteering at our workshops through preparing applications or registering people to vote, which my colleague will later explain about our New Americans Democracy Project, which is kind of the next step after our program. And lastly, due to the success that the program has had in Illinois, we've been able to share some of those best practices in other states. There are a few states that have already implemented something similar to our program, from Washington to Maryland, and there's a few others that are still looking into it. So I'd like to just finish off by saying we always welcome not only questions, but you're always more than welcome to use our materials. I have some examples of our latest promotional materials. We have a couple of different commercials, whether it be through paid media and TV, as well as radio and print. So I know there's unfortunately lack of infrastructure in other states, as well as resources. So anybody that's either wants to start something or wants to know more of the programmatic aspect, you're more than welcome to approach me. Thank you.
Thanks so much for such tight presentations. I'm going to have a quick comment and a first question. The first comment is it's striking thinking about at least both Chicago and San Jose. Think about the post-06 citizenship trends, places where both local governments have been supportive, and we saw massive and historic marches. I want to draw your attention to this official bulletin that's outside. It's a little bit eyes glaze over-ish, but if you go to the very last page, you'll see city-level data. And in the Chicago metro area, in 06, there were 29,000 new citizens. In 08, 43,000 odd new citizens. And in the San Jose metro area, there was an increase from 14,000 new citizens in 06 to 24,000 in 08. These are really dramatic rates. These are not the applications. These are people who actually made it through the process. And I mention these as a powerful example of the positive synergy that is possible between local governments and the potential real representation of immigrants and migrant civil society. So this brings me to the question, which is, if we think back to the 06 immigrant rights mobilization, thinking of the local governments you know best, what would you say has been the main trend in terms of the commitment of local government? And I want to start off with Alice, because in Charlotte, I think, may have had a very different experience, and as part of recognizing the diversity of experiences on the ground, and maybe we could hear about Indianapolis as well, I'd love to learn more. So, Alice, please.
Excuse me. As I was the comment that I was making in the opening statement, there has really not been a lot of synergy between local governments and the immigrant population in Charlotte, unfortunately. Again, they will readily come out to hear a report. They'll readily come out and have a conversation. But when it comes to actually addressing policy issues, that is the only thing that we actually have that elected officials have actually done is Representative Sue Myrick, who, in response to a fatal drunk driving incident in Charlotte, actually authorized the city of Charlotte sheriff, to actually do a crackdown on immigrant drunk driving. Instead of looking at drunk driving as an issue across the whole city and across the whole county, she specifically focused in on the immigrant population, because this one incident, unfortunately, there was an immigrant driving. But then a few weeks later, there was a similar situation where a Caucasian young man was driving, but the issue was not really placed on him as much as it was the immigrant. And then, of course, there's the enforcement of the 287G program, where she has given the sheriff the authority to just lock up and deport immigrants, if they're stopped for whatever reason, and the program, to my understanding, is through Homeland Security and is actually looking for people who are here illegally, who are known felons or criminals, but when you're driving and your driver's license might have expired if you have one, or if you maybe ran a stop sign, you're at risk of being incarcerated and deported. So you're separating family, and you're causing a lot of pain, and you're causing a lot of grief. But there has been unfortunately, no synergy between the local government at this point and the immigrant community, which is sad.
Thanks. Well, Ricardo, how does it look in Indianapolis, which you know so well?
Well, first of all, let me mention that also for the last couple of months, we have been trying to work with Charlotte on these issues. We're in conversations, and I hope very soon NLC will be able to provide with some technical assistance to the city of Charlotte. And also, let me say that we represent, a very diverse group of mayors. Mm-hmm. And also a very diverse group of cities. In the case of Indianapolis, and I want to focus just for a couple of minutes, for 8 years we were able to improve the relationship between the immigrant community and local government. We were very lucky to have a great mayor, former Mayor Bart Peterson. Some people claim that he was too friendly. That is why he lost re-election, but I don't want to go into that. I think that was not true. But the point is that for 8 years, the city was open, to work with the immigrant community, with different groups. We were able to develop different programs in different areas on public safety, small business, community development, economic development, education, recreation, sports, things like that. So I think it's possible. It's not very easy, as many people from other cities can agree on this. Every city is different, is unique, and that is why what we try to do right now at the national level is try to promote best practices from different cities all over the country. We want to promote the exchange of ideas and best practices between all the cities in the United States. I think, it's going to be very interesting to see how many cities respond to this kind of initiatives, Immigration is a federal issue, but with profound implications at the local level. And first of all, we need to fix our immigration system. And after that, we need to continue working to try to develop a national immigration policy because, as you know, immigrant integration happens at a local level.
Thanks. Luvia?
Just wanted to mention one example of a local government. Even though Illinois overall is an immigrant-friendly state, we have had some exceptions, one of them being Waukegan, which is in the north side of Chicago, suburb/city. Unfortunately, there, the previous mayor, Henry Hyde, he did, I think back in 2007, around 2008, he tried to do the 287G. In a very nonpartisan way. He just lost re-election in February, and it was in thanks to the great turnout of the Latino community. So the community came out and pretty much told him this is not going to be allowed, and now the new mayor has committed to change that.
Thanks.
So in Santa Clara County, we've been very fortunate with our local representatives. But one of the things that we find is that also the media plays a big impact in terms of the fear that exists in the community. So when the media covers that there's a raid in the southern United States, everyone is in a panic. Mm-hmm. So that's also part of what we're seeing is that although locally we don't have a lot of the issues, the stress in the community is still there because we are living through the media. And so our communities are experts at every raid that's happened, what your rights are, because it's constantly being covered in the media, to the point where I do community presentation and I say, you know what, cut the TV set off for 2 weeks. Because also the media is also trying to keep you up till 11 o'clock. They're trying to sell more space in terms of their advertisement, and it is causing stress, and the kids are also watching all this stress, and so they're feeling that I see 3-year-olds talking about the need for immigration reform. Wow. And don't take away my mommy. And so, I mean, this is also part of the reality that we're living with the media, and I think it's part of a conversation that we have to have.
Thanks. Okay, well, I think we're ready to start the dialogue here, and if Shannon, you'd like to go first, we'll work our way around the table. And please begin by identifying yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, all of you. My name is Shannon Gleason. I'm an assistant professor of Latin American and Latino Studies at UC Santa Cruz. And I just had a couple of questions. First, I wondered how, from your perspective, you're in some ways representing different levels of government, all at the local level, but how do you guys see that we can keep all jurisdictions engaged? So, for example, Tere, you're representing the county, but, you know, how do you then not replace the role that the city of San Jose might also need to be taking within, you know, that area? And not that you're trying to, but a lot of times, you know, the city might assume, oh, well, the county is doing these services, and how do you keep pressure on the different cities within the county to also stay engaged? And the similar problem, you know, we're talking about urban areas that have many, many, many suburban cities sprawled out around them. So in the case of Chicago and San Jose, you know, how do you see cities around you either replicating or going against some of the models that you're presenting? And then just my second question is, you know, we're dealing with politically charged issues with outgoing mayors and incoming mayors. And to contrast this example of Waukegan, we have an outgoing mayor in the city of Houston who is now starting to launch 287G. And so even in this example, you know, it's a mayor who's not running for re-election but maybe has other aspirations. And so how do you deal with the changing volatility of maybe you win over one mayor but then he's gone, maybe you have a changing election? So just some questions to throw out there.
I think that the difficulty is there's no standard. There is no nationwide standard. So depending on which region you are and politically where the politicals are at, you might get support or you might not get support. The other thing that means is also the change is not institutional. It happens to be that you found a good person who is willing to be open on this and willing to stand with the community. And so we've seen government, I mean, even in Santa Clara County, become more conservative in the past 8 years. That's the reality that we've been facing. And I think in terms of Santa Clara County competing with the city of San Jose, the demographics are so big that there's not enough funding, there's not enough resources to meet the real need that exists. In Santa Clara County, we do fund immigration legal services, but we know if there's a teeny tiny change in immigration law, we do not have enough community-based providers to address that situation. And you're going to get people being defrauded and gypped out of a future here because there's not enough resources that exist in the community. So even in Santa Clara County that is invested for over 13 years, we know that we cannot meet the need if there is a little blip of a change in immigration reform.
I think in regards to other cities, either one trying to replicate the New Americans Initiative or trying to use some kind of model, we've always been public. The program is very political. It mainly got started because of the relationship of Congressman Gutierrez with the former governor. So I think we have to be very cautious in who you involve. And at the same time, given that it is a state program, you do have to invite legislators. We constantly, every single month, we invite legislators to our workshops, as well as do celebration of new citizens in conjunction with oath ceremonies. So I think keeping in mind the importance of what politicians want, which is having their name next to their new voter. So being very public about it. So I guess in a way of, one idea of trying to replicate it is involving politicians to an extent, but you definitely have to have the advocates at the table. The advocates are the ones that know. One of the things that we have done is, because of the community, is a media campaign. Out of the $3 million, more than $2 million of it goes directly into the community. We only take less than 10% of it for the administration. So being very conscious of what the needs of the community are, but bridging the gap between politicians and the community. In regarding to changes of politicians, one thing that we're going to be doing is incorporating census work into the program. And I know that hasn't been touched too much upon. I'll just say briefly, I think it's really important if we want anything to change to do the census work. So given the interests of politicians, trying to engage them in that way.
Thanks. Just to clarify, it's a $3 million annual state budget for New Americans? Was that?
As of right now.
As of right now, right. Okay, thanks.
We are looking at a possible 60% cut.
Wow.
Okay.
To the first question, how do you engage all levels of government on the issue of immigration? I think with help, one of the things that we hold ourselves one of the things we take pride in is being able to hold public officials accountable for issues. Even though we don't have the synergy within the government as of right now, we do have a very important mayoral race coming up in the fall. And one of the things that we've been doing is as we're trying to build the immigration work in the community, is we're now actually having meetings with the elected officials. And the way that we do it to keep everybody engaged is our county government handles health and human services. Our city council handles more infrastructure and housing. And then we, of course, have a school board, and then we also have the governor. So depending on what the issues are, whether it's healthcare issues, then we'll go to county. If it's around housing, then we go to the city. And, of course, if it's education, we'll go to the Board of Education. But we keep them all engaged on the level that is going to address the issue. And once we identify, because sometimes we have to actually give them, as I was stating earlier, we have to share our vision because they don't always have one. So we have to share what our vision of what that, I guess you could call it equity and justice, looks like from our behalf, and then we engage them on that vision and hold them accountable to whatever it is that we determine is going to be in the best need of the community. So,
Thanks.
Well, going back to Indianapolis for a second, in our case, for the first 4 years, we have full support from the governors and the governor's office. That made a difference at the time. And then, we have, again, elections. And even when you don't want to mix politics and policy, we know at the end, politics always is there. And the new governor decided not to support any of these efforts. So I think made a difference, have the support and try to work together at a local and state and federal level. That can make the difference in many cities and towns across the country.
Okay, next question. On this side, others? Susanna? Yeah.
Well, I commented earlier that you mentioned that we're in the process of redefining the American identity, and that there's a process that goes along with that. But in as far as an industry, the media, what we're doing, working closely with folks like Unity, which is a consortium of 4 different ethnic associations of journalists, and then folks like the National Association of Hispanic Publications. We're looking, my specific project with the Association of Hispanic Publications is actually looking at the work that's been done on coalition building with ethnic media, and instead of reinventing the wheel, kind of overlooking a larger group effort. Well, my question to you is, again, the idea that as consumers, because in this country we're all consumers and we're a huge consumer base, being immigrants, the lack of familiarity even of government employees and government officials knowing their own systems, with the onboarding of new administrations coming on board, et cetera. What are recommendations that you all see across the board? I mean, I think this is a great attempt for people to share best practices here from across different regional communities, but what are best practices that you can see moving forward through the nonprofit sector, be it through the nonprofit sector or any kind of training institutes for upcoming or onboarding elected officials?
Best practices with elected officials? Some of the most successful things that I've seen is that when you get a diversity of immigrant communities, try to hold elected officials accountable. Because when they only meet with one ethnic group, it's easy to make different promises to different people and never be held accountable. And so where I've seen it be much more successful has been where you have a diversity of groups coming together and saying, we want to address this issue as a group, not just as Latinos or not just as Vietnamese, but we want to talk about this bigger issue. I've seen that be very productive. The other thing that I've seen also be very productive is when you have kind of leadership institutes that are multi-ethnic. Because I think if we're going to get to what real political power is you have to do coalition building and you have to do alliance building, and that begins with relationships. If you don't have a relationship with somebody in that community, it's going to be really hard to work with somebody in that community. So I think even when we do small leadership institutes, it's with the idea that we have diversity there, that we have diversity represented, and that we have more in common than actually divides us. Because even if you look at language and history and education, I have had leadership institutes where I have Iranians and Latinos, and by the end of the cycle, there is more agreement than disagreement. And in the beginning, they were talking about who had masters and who hadn't finished it and who had a PhD. But there was more of a commonality by the end than there was difference. And I think if we look at it, that's something that's very positive. And by bringing people together in a space, you can have the Iranian community say, wow, look at what you Latinos are accomplishing. Because the Latinos were like, we never do enough, we're never happy, you know, we haven't moved fast enough. And I think you also need the space from other communities to hear, hey, we're impressed with what you've done. You've accomplished a lot in a short time period. So that also gives you the opportunity for that kind of change and for that kind of leadership.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. Going back to the issue of working with the immigrant media, I think that is very important. We're in the process to produce a policy paper. A briefing on this issue will be released in the next 2 months. I will be happy to send you a copy on that. I think it's very important for mayors and local officials to try to learn how to work with the immigrant media in their communities. Also, on this particular issue, this is going to help, you know, to promote the census effort next year and also this year. And about best practices, let me tell you a little bit about a small town in Colorado, the city of Leadertown, a small city, only 48,000 people, and you can see as one of the cities who is taking the lead at the national level in the area of immigrant integration. You have a very proactive mayor who is working with the private sector, with community organizations, with faith-based organizations, with the business community to try to develop a local immigrant integration plan. I think that is one of the best examples right now in 2009 in the area of immigrant integration cities in the United States. And also, in the area of training, NLC provide different training opportunities to mayors and local officials in different issues related to the immigration policy and also immigrant integration.
Excuse me, that city again was, or town?
Leadertown.
Little town?
Leadertown.
In what state?
In Colorado.
Colorado. Okay, thank you.
I think for us, I mean, there have been some things similar to in San Jose, in that county, but I think in regards to best practices, it's showing that immigrant integration is not only about the Latino community in our case. We saw a huge difference of when you put an Irish speaker in front of a politician versus your average Mexican or Latino, from having an Irish leader going to Mayor Daley and holding him accountable, to simply just taking thousands of immigrant leaders to the Capitol and showing that immigrants not only vote, but they're also going to be going to their offices and hold them accountable. So I think it's a mix of education as well as trying to have more diverse group for the purposes of media as well as in front of the politicians.
We actually have, while we've had conversations on an organizer's point of view, from and just of course staff, we've not had that conversation in depth with the Latino community. But I do totally agree that the more diverse the group, probably the more impactful whatever work you're going to do with elected officials. But it's not a step that we've made yet. But it is something that we are hoping to explore soon.
Thanks. Okay. Next question over here. I think in back, you haven't asked a question yet. Yes. Please identify yourself.
They're the organizer from Charlotte.
Yo me estoy acordando cuando mis hijos...
Perdón, que se puede identificar, por favor.
Reyes Brizuela de Help en Charlotte, Carolina del Norte.
Gracias.
Me estoy acordando lo que yo le reclamo a mis hijos nacidos acá, que les digo por qué quieren olvidar el español. Y yo tampoco me quiero olvidar de él. Fíjense bien, yo quiero ampliar lo de Alice y a ella hay que agradecerle mucho porque realmente está haciendo un buen trabajo para la comunidad inmigrante. En el 2008, esta es por la relación que hemos tenido como organización con el gobierno local. En el 2008 nosotros tuvimos una reunión con la que era candidata a gobernadora de Carolina del Norte. En ese tiempo ella se comprometió a trabajar junto con la comunidad. Estábamos los morenos, estaban los anglos y estábamos nosotros los hispanos. Cuando ya ella fue electa, el 18 de mayo tuvimos una reunión con ella y en donde le pedimos por favor que nos permitiera estar en contacto con su gabinete de gobierno. y ella accedió. Y estas reuniones que estamos teniendo ayer precisamente, estábamos con el director de comercio del gobierno de Carolina del Norte. Entonces nuestras relaciones con las autoridades máximas en Carolina del Norte han sido muy excelentes y realmente tenemos una organización muy poderosa como es el IAF. Esa organización es Areas Industrial Foundation. Esta tiene una organización que se llama el Poder Unido de Carolina del Norte. Entonces, nosotros hemos estado haciendo bastantes relaciones, construyendo relaciones con autoridades locales, especialmente con la señora gobernadora. Y por eso yo los invito a ustedes que realmente la comunidad inmigrante necesita mucho de la participación de las organizaciones. Lastimosamente en Charlotte se da una situación que existen como 200 organizaciones, pero no trabajan para proteger al inmigrante, trabajan para hacer negocios. Entonces, prácticamente nosotros estamos luchando contra el mismo inmigrante, pero tenemos que educarlo. Mi pregunta es para los panelistas. En los estados que ustedes representan, ¿cuántos de ustedes han tenido contacto con su autoridad máxima, que es el gobernador?
Empiezo yo. For us, it was very consistent and constant with our former governor. With the new governor, it has been limited, whether it be because of the budget crisis or just within internal issues. But as a coalition, as well as within our member organizations, we have great relationships with different branches, from the senators to representatives. With the mayor, it's getting there. It's been improving slowly, again, thanks to us realizing that it was a matter of putting people that he was going to listen. So I think the relationships have been changing with him. But I think it's extensive from Attorney General to et cetera.
So with the state legislature, we've had a lot of contact. We've been promoted as a statewide model in trying to receive funding, but our governor is Arnold Schwarzenegger, and so he has not engaged in this issue the whole time he's been governor.
Well, in our case, we are working very closely with the National Governors Association all the time, especially on immigration reform. We have a special working group. We met with people from the transition several times, and we're looking forward to continue working with different governors across the nation.
Just to add a comment, and to Reyes's point, we have been meeting with the governor, but again, this is the very beginning of building that relationship. IAF, you're right, is a very powerful organization, but I don't think that she still quite understands what it is that we do and how we do it. So it is just the very beginning of building that relationship. While we do have communication with her and her cabinet, there's a learning curve. So we definitely have to get her to really understand what it is we do, how we do it, and the impact of her meeting with us and being available to us.
Thanks. Yes, the gentleman over here. Please identify yourself.
My name is Samar Chatterjee from SAFE Foundation. There are a lot of issues you've raised, but there's one I would focus on, this among the issues, taking away kids from the parents and the 287G. I think it's a very shameful act that people are resorting to. When I came in 1970 to this country as a student, and subsequently I became a green card holder, and then I became a citizen, we always heard that slogan with the Statue of Liberty with the hands projected. Give me your, starving or harried masses, I've forgotten the rest of it, that we will accommodate all of you in here. I guess that quote is probably forgotten by our right wing, particularly in this country, which is a shame. And it's both in the Republican and Democratic Party. It's a shame to be doing that. At the same time, of course, they should have been careful when there was a huge mass of people coming in. But since they have not, I believe that they are stuck and they need to accommodate them in whatever way. And I do feel that it'll be probably after Barack Obama is re-elected, that we'll get our election, our Immigration Reform Act, if he does get elected. And therefore, most of us should try to get him re-elected, because I don't think the Immigration Reform Bill is going to succeed before he completes his 4-year term. Finally, I have a question on some of those who are helping people become citizen. Are you paying their citizenship fee? Because those are getting so high. I think it's absolute. When I came to this country, they waived out even green card fee. I remember they said, we want you to be good citizens, and therefore you don't have to pay. Since then, the country has become really, really stingy. They're trying to rob most of our immigrants in a big way. I mean, now I have a relative who has just come, and the amount of money they have to pay just to get a green card is over $1,000, which I think in my time, if they had told me, I would have said, get lost, I'm not coming to this country. That would have been my position. But I guess in those days, they were really welcoming. I mean, I really felt when I went for the first interview in an American embassy, we felt like we were welcome. But nowadays, nobody feels that way. Those who go for an interview, it's a really shame again. So given that, I feel that you should tell them, and this is my experience, I have to tell them that people, when they complete their either 3-year, when they're married to an American citizen, or when they complete 5-year with a green card, they should become citizen. I guess that should be one of your campaign. The reason for that is, if they find out that your political views exactly doesn't match with the people, they may try to. Our prosecutors are pretty rough. They would try to deport you, and they tried with me, but they didn't know that I had become a citizen. So given that, you need to emphasize that as soon as you become eligible, please go ahead and apply for it, because it is important, because they cannot deport you unless they charge you of treason, which is the only way they can strip your citizenship. And that's a suggestion I would have those who are promoting citizenship in this country.
So on the question of the fees, anyone like to comment?
Given that we're a state-funded program, we're not able to pay for people's fees. We have implemented a couple of different loan programs throughout the state. So for those people that want to have loan programs, as well as helping people with fee waivers. The other thing in regards to your comment, thank you, in regards to telling people if they just got their green card, the importance of citizenship. That's one of the main shifts that we have done in our program. Originally, it was all about become a citizen. Now we're putting a lot more focus on the education aspect. An example is we have a brochure using kind of some popular education of kind of know your rights for legal permanent residence. So it's anything from not being out of the country for more than 6 months to if you don't pay your taxes, you won't be able to become a citizen and those kind of things. So we're definitely as nice as we could put it, using scare tactics in the community, because unfortunately that's what works. I mean, we saw it back in 2006. If you don't tell people having a green card is not enough, they're not going to realize it. And in regards to your fee, we have realized that of how much now the fee is $675, versus if you compare that to how much the minimum wage has been increased in the last 10 years, doesn't compare.
Thanks. Anyone other comments? Okay. Comments on the fees? Yeah.
So what we have in Santa Clara County is that we worked with local foundations to create sort of a loan program. For every dollar they save, they get 3 back. It's limited. We can only serve 500 families a year, but it is something that we did get together with local foundations, because when we saw the increase in fees, since we had been holding citizenship days every 6 months, we saw a 70% drop in the number of people applying. And so based on that, we went to the foundation and said, look, this is too big of a drop. We expected a drop, but not like this. And so based on that, they were able to commit to this savings program, which also has a literacy program connected to it. I think the other issue that you deal with citizenship is obviously it depends on the relationship of the immigrant community to the nation, to this nation, and whether they want to become citizens or not. Because, I mean, obviously, the issue for a lot of Mexicanos is my sense of identity is connected to being a Mexican national. And yes, we have dual nationality, but we have a history between 2 countries and U.S. imperialism. So it's bigger than just, decide to become a citizen. It's about a whole history. The other thing that also happens is that as Latinos, you're dealing with a racialized process in the immigration process. So you get stopped by the police more than other people do. Paleteros get stopped for doing their work. It's part of the barriers that are being placed in terms of that citizenship process. So yes, part of it is our internal stuff as a community, but the other part is the external stuff and the racism that we face in this country.
Thanks. On the issue of how to effectively communicate the message of encouraging citizenship, I want to really draw your attention to a study that was mentioned briefly earlier that David Ayon did on the Ya Es Hora campaign. It's, I think, a fabulous account of a remarkable program. And with that, I'll turn the next question to David himself.
Thanks. David Ayon, Center for the Study of Los Angeles. I'd like to ask Luvia about, in particular, and this relates to several of the questions that have been asked, and this other bulletin that was distributed with tables on naturalization. Fiscal year 2007 was a very big year for the increase in naturalization, in part because of the big increase in the fees that came in July of 2007. And that created a sense of urgency. That was one of the, even though Ya Es Hora was organized before there was any announcement that there would be a fee increase, they almost became merged, that Ya Es Hora before the fees go up, and that emerged over time. If you look at those tables in that bulletin, if anyone's interested in this, if we can drill down a little bit as to what works and what works better, perhaps, tables 2 and 3, if you look at Illinois and if you look at Chicago, you see steady increase year over year in naturalizations, but not nearly as much of an increase. The increase in naturalizations of 2008, I'm assuming, reflects significantly the increase in applications of 2007 at the time at which the fees went up. The increase for Chicago in Table 3 and for Illinois in Table 2 is not nearly as great as those places that had a Ya Es Hora campaign. Ya Es Hora, you can see it very clearly where it was most successful was in Los Angeles. Miami also had significant buy-in. Ya Es Hora had as sort of as its spinal column was Univision, the Univision affiliates. The Chicago affiliate did not participate in Ya Es Hora. You didn't have the campaign. And I think that there's a couple of questions that arise from this, because, in fact, even though you have an increase of about 6,000 more naturalizations in the Chicago area in 2008 than you had in 2007, the increase in L.A., and of course we're comparing very different pools, was an increase of 60,000, right? But you can more fairly compare them proportionately. This is the concept of market share. If you see, in 2007, the Chicago area's share of the country's naturalizations was 5.7%. It goes down to 4.2% in 2008. And the same pattern you can see on the statewide level. So my questions are these. I'm not criticizing what you have in Illinois. It's a great success that you have the state government get behind naturalization, citizenship promotion. But I'm wondering if there aren't, I think that there are 3 possible explanations to what we're seeing in the numbers. What the numbers show was that Illinois and Chicago did not benefit as much in 2007 as those places that had a Ya Es Hora campaign. One is, and I wonder if you've looked at this and tried to figure out why that would be. Why did you lose market share, so to speak, in Chicago and in Illinois compared to the rest of the country around a critical year, the 2000 fee increase year, in which a lot of other places benefited a lot more? One is that, is there a trade-off for being a state-supported program in that you would take, for example, your website. When I look at the website, Ya Es Hora had a website, and the local affiliates in Los Angeles and in Miami and a lot of other cities had a second website. Those obviously in Spanish. Your website is not. And when I look at your website, when you first go to the New Americans website, I myself find it hard to find the link that takes you to Spanish. Now, obviously, I'm speaking from a Latino point of view here, or from a Spanish-dominant point of view. But since it is a state-supported program, you don't really target one language group. So it's available in English. It's available to everyone. But I wonder if there isn't something of a lesson to be learned there, sort of a trade-off. Secondly, the Yayasora campaign really emphasized, well, it had this message. It had a coherent message that it was propagated through lots of different media, not just Univision, but also on radio and also in Spanish language print. I don't get the sense from the New Americans Initiative that it's a campaign, that it's conveying urgency. So that's missing as a part of a communication strategy. Thirdly, I wonder if perhaps yourselves, you just didn't capitalize enough on the fact that the fee increase was coming. I don't know what you did, but I'm not able to find in my research all the way in L.A., I'm not able to detect what you might have done or perhaps not done. Lastly, the best thing that you could say in your defense is that, not that I'm putting you on the defensive, I don't mean to do that, but want to drill down and figure this out.
Not at all.
Is that you could say, I've heard this said before, is that the pool was just simply smaller there because you had been increasing already more in previous years through the work that you were doing. But I think these are serious questions with regard to messaging, with regard to the use of public funds, the constraints that puts on you, and perhaps the sort of choices that you made in that year that might, one way or the other, explain this loss, proportionate loss, compared to other places that had a different approach.
Luvi, I gather your colleague from ICI are willing to help out here, so your call on whether to take this or want to say?
I think we could probably do it together,
okay,
given that he works in the voter registration aspect. In regards to your questions, what was your first name? David. I think you're right. The pool is very different. When you look at the legal permanent resident population in Illinois, eligible people that could apply is about 370,000 compared to California. I know it's over 1 million. I can't remember exactly how many. In regards to the website, our website is in Spanish, hasteciudadanoahora.org. We mainly drive the people to our 800 number. We've learned in Illinois, depending on the level of education, in our case, most of the Latino population has a 6th grade level of education or lower. So we try to mainly think of who we're doing, of it being run of a campaign versus a program. Our state funds do not limit us of the messaging. So our messaging was completely Ya es hora, hazte ciudadano y vota. And that's how we integrated to the other campaign my colleague could talk more about. So we did a mix of press conferences to interviews to everything. So I'm not sure the research, but I know from our end we thought that we did the best that we could of trying to warn the community of the fee increase of July in 2007. The other thing also is that, how you said, our program has been running for a few years, and the community knows that almost every single Saturday we have a workshop. So I don't know if they were relying on that and didn't feel the urgency, or maybe it's also a mix of looking more into the mix of the foreign-born population in Illinois, that the number of people that applied drastically with the ISORA was Latino versus in Illinois, that not only do we have the Latinos, but we also have the Polish, the South Asians, Koreans, and Chinese. So it's the sense of urgency wasn't there for the other communities, because we still see it now. The ones that are still applying for citizenship are South Asians, Chinese, Koreans. To them, the fee increase wasn't that impactful. What was your other question? I think that was most of it for mine.
Okay, hang on.
The decline proportionately, is it something that you tried to figure out?
Are you saying the decline now or the decline versus the other states?
2007 over 2008.
Oh yeah, we're still feeling it now. There's nowhere that we're ever going to be able to serve the number of people we were serving before, which before in a given workshop, we're helping close to 400 individuals. Now we help, if we're lucky, 90 in one workshop. So the decline is definitely there. That's why we're trying to change our message around what are you going to miss? Protect yourself, and the whole thing of, again, that a green card is not enough. So we are definitely looking at it, and we're trying to be a little bit more creative. And trying to see if it's only the fee increase or if there's other factors that are now taken into play.
Thanks. And just one minute follow-up for Juan Jose, because you get another whack later this afternoon on the next question.
I would say that California had such a sudden increase because they hadn't done it prior. You know, the argument to me that we had started in 2004, 2005, and slowly over time we're increasing the market share. You know, if you look at how we increased it in fiscal year 2006 relative to California, you know, we really start to spearhead the idea of focusing on citizenship, right? And where do you think Yasora got their idea to do a citizenship campaign? You know, like, New Americans Initiative was one of the first ones in the country to really, like, spearhead that. And our campaign, the ICR does a strategic idea that to lead a campaign around citizenship, we tie it directly to our election cycles. You know, so our electoral program incorporates the citizenship campaign, and we fund it through that strategically, right? So during an election cycle, when we're doing voter registration, we also see a bump of our potential legal permanent resident contacts, which is then funneled over to the citizenship campaign, right? So there's a slight delay in the increase on a fiscal year because the campaign focus is during the election cycles and during our voter registration in GOTV. So there's always going to be a slight delay. So if you're looking at fiscal year, for example, 2008, you know, the election year caused us to have a bump in new legal permanent residents, but that didn't have an impact. It won't have an impact until fiscal year 2009. You know, when the fiscal years don't coincide with our notion of electoral calendars.
Thanks. We just said voices from the cutting edge. I think Tere has a quick San Jose comment.
As a county program, I mean, I think it's a plus when the state funds naturalization programs. We haven't had in the state of California funding for the last year and a half, and that has had a big impact on our community, even though you have a Yasora campaign. So I think both of them are key to mobilizing our community. Both of them are important, and we need that kind of participation on the state level and on the national level.
Thanks. Okay, final comment or question? Please introduce yourself, Angelica. Please remind everyone who CHIRLA is.
Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles. I always love this, healthy competition, you know, but I think it actually is very good. But I think these are just some explanations that I think around what's going on. The first thing I think is that California actually began the state initiative naturalization service program early in 2000. But what I think Illinois has done so well is the way they marketed their state program. In terms of, and I think that's different. So we've had the infrastructure in which monies from up to $3 million each year from the state. It's a permanent line item in the budget that's just dedicated to naturalization services. And in Santa Clara, certain organizations actually receive funding to do this work in the very same way that Illinois does. And this has been an ongoing program. And so part of the way that is different about Illinois, which I also think is very innovative, is that it basically has a coordination around outreach. So anybody getting monies from the state of Illinois, actually they have a conversation about how they're going to coordinate. But then going back to, I think, why Los Angeles and others were so successful around that Yasora campaign is it was tied to what was happening around the raids and the enforcement on immigrant communities. If you look at any advertisement around Yasora, the lead-in story of the news was this is what has just happened in the United States, in California, in Los Angeles. And it usually was a story about people being arrested, families being torn apart. The second, so that's the lead-in story, that's what happened. The next piece was, and that is why Yasora. So that so from my perspective and what I've lived through in terms of doing a lot of workshops, we did workshops of up to 2,000 people in Los Angeles all at once, and then did all the different ones. And this the same, I would say, in Santa Clara, very similar. What ended up happening was that people understood that they were becoming citizens, not just because the fee was increasing, but because the risk for their families was increasing. And so I think that I think has been maintained. And I think that it was and then it was connected to what the future could be. Could it be better? And I have to say, all the anecdotal, all the people who I ever talked to, who I was filling out paperwork, yeah, the fee's increasing, but I better become a citizen because people need me to support. I need to support. This is a duty that I have. And so I think that that's one of the explanations. It'd be good to look at the media content, and so you could see the linkages.
Thanks very much. I think we've just about hit our time, so I'm going to invite everyone to have a quick bite to eat, and please, everyone, be back here by 1 o'clock. We're going to do a very gringo media hora kind of thing. Thanks very much to our panel.